Hello YouTube, Sir Dragon X here. Today we're going to do part one of a two-part series of what to look for when building or buying a house in Mexico. We even have a special guest that's an expert in sustainability construction. Today, I have a special guest, Mike Lester, who happens to be an expat from New Zealand. He also runs a property inspection business here in San Miguel de Allende. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
So I've worked in construction in New Zealand before I came to Mexico, and when we came to Mexico and we were buying our first house, I could see that there are a lot of issues in the construction in the various houses we saw. And I saw the opportunity to start a business to help expats understand what's normal in local construction. There are a range of issues that are very, very common, how to solve those issues, and also how to turn some of the problems that do exist into special advantages that can really improve a house.
And as a matter of fact, Mike, you actually inspected our house before we moved in. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and actually, I forgot to mention that you're also an expert in sustainable construction.
Yeah, so I studied sustainable building design with MIT. I'm a certified expert in solar technology, solar hot water and solar power, and I have a real passion for it. I grew up on a farm in New Zealand with rainwater collection, with solar power, and there are so many great ways we can improve our lives with sustainable technology.
And actually you utilize some of that sustainable technology in one of the actual suggestions that you gave us, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
We're standing right by it.
This right here, this table used to be a skylight. Am I correct?
Yeah, so originally this was a skylight down at ankle height, a thin pane of glass, a long drop into the lounge below, very dangerous, but I saw that.
Especially if someone got drunk and fell onto the skylight,
yeah,
they would end up probably 3 floors down on the floor. Am I correct?
Yeah, it wasn't a great design, but I saw it and I saw an opportunity, because with the skylight, one of the issues we have here in San Miguel is in the hot season the houses can get very hot, and so you can spend a lot of money on air conditioning. But instead, with proper ventilation and management of the heat, the buoyancy of the hot air, it can rise up, it can escape, and then in the winter and the cooler months you can close the ventilation and you can keep the warmth in.
And you can also attest that we don't have air conditioning in our house.
No, there's no need for air conditioning.
Exactly, because of this, the heat rises. The heat that comes in the morning or in the afternoon, in the late afternoon, actually rises, and then we keep these things open, and it keeps the house ventilated, and it keeps it at a very, very comfortable temperature.
Yeah, and during the hot season locally, with the local climate, a lot of the heat is in the afternoon, so the afternoon sun that comes in is what really warms up your house.
I'm going to demonstrate how this works. This is the screen. This is the window, and then all we do is put the screen over the window. And can I mention, it also adds a social aspect. We now have a table to entertain. Okay, Mike, so explain to us, what are some of the common issues that you can find in construction here in Mexico?
One of the fundamental issues with local construction is education. And that leads to the full range of problems. And the most common things are problems with concrete, with waterproofing, and then with some of the household systems themselves. So with concrete, the main problem is with curing. So concrete becomes strong through a chemical process. And if it is allowed to dry out in the sun, if it gets too hot, then it doesn't cure and it doesn't become strong. And when it doesn't become strong, it cracks over time. So a house that's brand new will look very nice, the concrete will look very clean, but over time as it heats and it cools, the expansion and contraction causes cracking. The cracking lets in water, and because the concrete isn't strong, the water can erode away the concrete.
Now, the other thing I noticed, Mike, most of the actual construction here in Mexico is a block or brick. It's not like in other places where you have a wood frame. Is there a reason why that they don't really do wood frame houses here? And I've also heard that there's a lot of issues with wood here. And the reason why I bring this up is because we use a lot of wood in the vigas and in the inside the house and that type of thing.
Yeah, so with the wood here, the wood that's commonly used in construction, it isn't baked, it isn't kilned. So the wood tends to have quite a high moisture content, and as it dries, and this is a very dry environment, it'll twist and warp. And so it's very common in houses that have seen a couple of years is you'll see a lot of twisting and warping in the wood. And also the wood itself tends to have a fungus that infects it, and you can see streaking in the wood that can tend to become worse over time because the wood itself also isn't treated. Most wood in Western cultures and in New Zealand we use a lot of timber in construction, and it's all treated to prevent that fungal buildup in the timber, and it's also kilned to give it a very consistent moisture content. And then you have wood that doesn't tend to twist and warp.
Now, Mike, one of the issues that we had with our house, and I'll use our house as an example, is with waterproofing. Those are some of the issues that you actually pointed out when you did your initial inspection of our house. Can you kind of explain a little bit what the issues are with waterproofing? And San Miguel, being that it rains a lot during rainy season, it can affect a house here and also in other areas of Mexico where it does rain a lot.
Yes, so there's a couple of issues here. So as I talked about before with the concrete, because the processes with the concrete aren't very good for protecting it from drying out, it does tend to crack. And when there's a crack, water will find a way. So this is where waterproofing becomes very important. The first thing is to make sure that any cracks are properly filled with a flexible material, and then a waterproofing surface that's going to be strong and durable to keep the water out. One of the challenges is waterproofing is generally where it can't be seen, and if you don't see the problem, you don't know there's a problem, and then the rainy season comes, the water soaks in, and it starts out as a drip, drip, drip coming through in the cracks, and then as it washes away the crack more and more, you get more and more water, which causes more and more damage.
And let me ask you this: these are things that if you come and you inspect a house, let's say it's brand new construction, those are things that you can probably see from the brand new construction, and also those are things that you can see if even buying a new used house. Are those things that you can actually see or prevent before it even happens?
Yes, correct. So when you look at the waterproofing, you can often see areas where the waterproofing hasn't been applied correctly, where it's too thin and hasn't created a good seal. I even see brand new houses where there are areas where there is no waterproofing added at all, which then leads to ongoing maintenance problems. And you can also see whether the inclination and the slope and the drainage for the roof areas is correct, so that water cannot accumulate in the ideal situation. It's going to run away. But if the water can get stuck there, the waterproofing will tend to break down, and then you have a point of weakness where the water starts to penetrate.
And let me ask you this, because we had this issue. We had good waterproofing, and maybe a year down the road, 2 years down the road, is it a good idea to have your house inspected again, maybe 2 years down the road, or 3 years down the road, or 5 years? I mean, I'm not an expert. What would be your suggestion?
So most of the waterproofing materials that are used here in San Miguel that I see are probably good for 2 years, 2 to 3 years. There are some stronger systems that will give 5 or even 10 years of protection. It really depends on what's been used in the construction. But one of the key things is before the rainy season, so late April is a good time, is to have a look at the waterproofing, check that it's still in good condition, and if there are any points of weakness, to reinforce those and make it stronger and better protected.
Now, we actually decided to buy our house, especially after your suggestions. But do you have cases where they're so extreme that you suggest not to buy the house, or that they decided not to buy the house based on your inspections, or other cases where they did improvements and later on they came back and said, thank you so much because these improvements, much like we did, thank you so much for these improvements. But can you give some examples?
Yeah, so I have some repeat customers where I gave them recommendations and they did buy their house, and then they made those changes. Or unfortunately, what I often see as well is where I highlighted potential problems and then those problems came to pass. Because there are a lot of small telltale signs that if you know what to look for, you can see the problem before it becomes a big problem. And I can think of one development here in town where I highlighted a large number of problems with the materials that were used and some of the systems that they had. And those problems became more and more pronounced over time. And they actually got me back to help guide them in rectifying some of those problems.
And I can use a perfect example. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
We actually went up on the roof to look at some solar panel, the possibility of putting some solar panels in because of your expertise in sustainability. And you noticed that our roof, the waterproofing was going to give out. And we got a little bit busy. Before rainy season, we had to leave. We left to Monterrey. And can you tell us, after looking at what you saw, what happened?
Well, we can go and have a look at what happened. It actually is a very good example of just how much damage can be done in just one rainy season if the waterproofing isn't in good condition. And it does highlight the importance of checking the waterproofing before the rainy season to make sure that it is going to provide good protection, because the rain that we get here in the rainy season, we get an awful lot of rain in a very short time.
Now, that was a lot of great information. Stay tuned for part 2. See you soon.